Welcome everyone. Good evening. This is the second webinar which we are doing in the startup fundraising series with our co-organizer for this series is Mr. Mandar Joshi. This time we have Windows Capital as our co-organizer as well. So we have Udvi Shrotia from Windows Capital and Mandar Joshi sir as well. So I'll start with the introduction how we got these speakers with us today. So Mr. Mandar is an angel investor, keynote speaker, and a startup mentor. He's been the strategic advisor and CFO at the Besser Capital Investment Group. So yeah, and during the this COVID period itself, he has invested in a lot of startups. So his portfolio startups involve Q-in-1 is insurance, and Om Bhakti, Auto Brakes, and Clear Deco. So mostly he doesn't. So the kind of startups question we receive, so that's what he doesn't think. So basically, he thinks beyond that and he invests in those startups. So that's how we thought like this is the best time to take him. To take his view on what investors look for in these startups. So we have Udvi Shodia from Windows Capital. Windows Capital invests in fintech, IoT, connectivity, business enablement, AI, ML startups. So basically, they have also invested in 16 startups so far, and that's how we'll also get to know from Udvi how they invest in the startups and how they've been planning to grow the startup ecosystem in India as well. So I welcome both of our speakers, Mandar sir and Urvi, joining us today. So
thank you, Gaurav.
yeah, so from the previous webinar itself, we have good response as well, in the feedback form, and also we have received good response, queries, and everything. So that's how we have been planning. Okay, we'll make sure the next webinar stays more interactive and more value it provides to the participants. So in between, what we'll open the session for the participants to ask question, and like in between we the participants whenever we require. So and you can also take the one-on-one questions. So whenever someone asks for that.
Yeah, sure.
And we'll try to cover as more as questions, but given the time limit we have. Otherwise, if you have any queries in the participants, you can directly write to us and you can take the share it with the speakers and share their answers with you. Right. So let's start with the first question itself. I mean, what is the hottest topic today? So, what investors look in a startup? So basically, that covers a whole lot of a list for the startups, what they have. So I'd like to know how you invest in the startups, how you evaluate them, how you analyze the particular opportunity when it comes to you. Yeah. So any one of you can go first.
Urvi, you can go first.
All right, perfect. I'll go first.
Yeah.
Right. Hi guys. Thanks a lot, Gaurav. And Mandar. It's been a great opportunity for us to be a part on this, of this webinar series that you guys are hosting. And I think it's a great initiative. Considering the time that we're in, a lot of startups would want to understand better, what investors' mindsets are. So I'll just quickly start off with what we at Windows Capital do and believe in. Uh, we're early stage investors and we typically follow a founder first perspective. So when I say founder first perspective, it means that we would ideally want to be the first call, once the company becomes a portfolio company, you want to be like a call away from the founders and, it typically handhold the company, etc., through their process, right? Through the startup journey. How we go about it is we have a specific process that we follow internally. It's quite an elaborate process that we have. Starting off with we encourage the startups, to give us a very detailed description, not just of the business but the team, what the customer outlook looks like, sector, and then the funding. Basis which we have our analysis and our own assessments done internally. There are certain pieces which we feel that are very critical for companies and founders to follow, especially the stage at which we're investing, right? So as I mentioned, founder first. So just to add on to that, that for us, the team plays a very important role. Primarily because of the stage at which we're looking to invest in, right? At an early stage, an idea could be fantastic, extremely innovative, but the right kind of team is something that we look at, who will not just, take the idea forward in terms of the initial execution, but also enable the company to grow beyond the idea, beyond the early stages of, getting the market validation, getting clients. There has to be a vision beyond what the current idea and the current plan is. So team plays a very important role for us. We also have a greater emphasis, and we would want to see a greater understanding of the market and what are the go-to market strategies that a team would have in place, right? uh, it's not necessary that we want it to be executed end to end, but it's something that we would want to understand, that at least the founder has a clear understanding of it or a vision around it. We typically look at and would want to invest in technology enabled companies. So as I said, tech enabled companies. Tech can be used as an enhancement feature. It may not be the only thing that is there present in the company, but yeah, having said that, it could be a normal traditional business, but the tech part of it plays a critical enough role to drive the business, right? So technology is something that tech enablement is something that we look at. uh, a good enough, fair enough understanding of the competitive advantage, how to build a competitive advantage, a clear understanding of a moat. It may not be present when we are looking at the company, when we're speaking to the founders, but we would want to see and, kind of judge whether a founder or a particular business in itself can create a moat. There are certain businesses, inherently it becomes very difficult to create the moat. So, we kind of stay away from those. We are not very sector specific. We do have certain sweet spots that we want to look at and invest in, primarily because of the experience and the expertise that we have and we bring in those specific sectors. uh, from a check size perspective, we would want to enter the company as an investor earlier on, so that kind of gives us space and scope to participate in subsequent rounds as well. So that's basically the theses that we follow at our end, in a broader perspective. As investors, these are the things that we look at, again coming to the point where not just the business idea, but a team will play a critical enough role for us to decide on how we want to go about with our investment.
Yeah, Urvi,
Yes,
very
sir.
nicely explained. For me as well, guys, you have to understand the difference. Urvi comes from Windrose Capital, which is an organized fund investing in startups. So they have very well laid down policies of, or structures whereby they select the startups. As far as
Right.
I'm concerned, I'm an individual angel investor, which means that I'm more flexible, I'm more nimble, but I also, at the same time, do not have the expertise or the time or the efforts that Windrose Capital can spend or any other VC can spend. I cannot spend that much. So my criteria is very simple. Apart from, of course, what Urvi said, and Urvi said a word called thesis. This is very important because every investor has his or her, or the fund has its own thesis or own criteria of selecting a startup. But broadly, if you see, for all investors in my community, as well as the VCs and Windrose Capital and others, acceleration funds that I'm in connection with, everybody looks at the founder first. Everybody looks at, this is a first go or no go decision factor, I would say, for everybody. uh, the behavior of the founder, the attitude of the founder, is this founder able to take this venture to the point that we imagine for the venture. So the founder for me is the one. If I do not like the founder, like as in, I'm not saying this is not subjective, but I do not find those qualities in the founder, then for me, I do not listen even to the business idea. I do not listen, to anything else. But when the first stage is crossed, which is the founder I like, he's able, he's confident, you know. The second thing for me is, of course, business idea. For me, you know, it's a simple thing. If the founder can explain the business idea in a simple way, okay, he will really attract my attention as an angel investor. Okay, because I've seen a lot of founders who talk
Sir, there is
jargons of
some
words. They
disturbance
want
in
to
the
create
network.
the next. Really?
Yeah. So you were breaking in between.
Hello. Am I okay now?
No,
There's a
sir.
bit of a lag, Mandar. There's just a bit of
Okay.
a lag. Yeah.
Maybe I will mute my video. Yeah, hello.
Yeah,
Is it
I
better now?
think.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Fine.
Yes.
So let's try with this for some time, and then I will try to open my video again.
Right.
So the second point for me is the business idea, of course, and the third point for me is the market size, which also will be mentioned.
Yeah.
Which is to me very important, because you know, even if the founder is capable, even if the business idea is great, if the market size, given market size is limited, you know, whatever the founder does with all his abilities, confidence, and you know, the intelligence, there is a limit that the market puts on how much he can expand his business. So yeah, we will come to more criteria in that, but these are, I think, 2-3 points immediately coming to my mind.
Okay. Perfect. So
Nice.
basically, we have from both of you, you have put on the founders or the team or the founding team as the first go or no go as well, right? So what in terms of founders do you suggest mostly? I mean, what should be the background of them, or they should be having any experience in that particular field, or coming from some, you know, pedigree from, let's say, from IIT, IIMs, or let's say, you know, foreign intern, because we have seen a lot of, you know, news around, you know, a lot of chat around, like only the IITs, IIMs guys get, you know, receiving the funds, or US return or foreign return in you know, founders receiving the funds. So what is your view on that? How do you see, I mean, right fit for you as a founder?
I'll can I go first?
Yeah. Yeah. Please feel free.
Yeah. So the video is okay now. Audio is okay. Everything is okay.
So audio and
No?
video both are lagging right now. So basically, I think if you could try again switching the video.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I will also change my. Yeah. Hello.
Yeah.
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 I think, yeah, it's
So
better now.
it's better, yeah, because I changed the connection. Anyways, answering your question, Gaurav, very interesting question, and this comes to me a lot of times. I'm sure it comes to Windrose Capital as
Yeah.
well.
Right.
For me, there is no criteria as such that, you know, only IIT or IIM or Stanford guy can approach me. It's not true. And you know, very interestingly, I was talking to Dr. Apurva Sharma. I'm sure everybody knows him, you know, from Venture Catalyst.
Venture Catalyst, yeah.
Yeah. So I was talking to him. I think this was a couple of weeks back, and you know, he funded the Oyo Rooms, Ritesh. When Ritesh was 17, he was alone, and he had not done even a single hotel converted into Oyo Rooms. So you know, what was it in Ritesh that you know hooked him up? So you know, I was having a conversation. So this is coincidentally now you are asking this question to me. To me, you know, that is not required. The educational background is not required. Of course, if you have IIT or IIM or you know, any Western qualifications in terms of management or technology, these are add-ons. These are good to have. Okay, but that's not an acceptance or rejection criteria. For me, the criteria is simply, as I said, the founder knows where the venture can go? This is one. Okay, and is the founder able to take that venture to where he knows that it may go? When I say he, sorry, he or she, because you know, 40% of my investments, we have women founders. So I should say always he and she, because it's almost 50-50. So to me, this is important. And secondly, I would also see that apart from educational background, I would say professional background is much more important. For example, if you are dealing in FMCG industry, the startup belongs to FMCG industry, I would of course see that the founder has prior experience working with FMCG and what exactly he did with FMCG. You know, if it is from retail sector, it applicable to everything. Education sector, so I want to know what is his background from education. Again, founder is excellent, business idea is also excellent, but I have to marry the both. I have to see that this founder is good for this business idea and vice versa. So I would say yes for professional experience, but not so much for educational background. Urvi?
Right. So I absolutely agree with you, Mandar, because that's never a make or break criteria even for us. Not the university that you've been to, or whether you've acquired your education by going out of the country, or any other esteemed institutes. Of course, as you rightly mentioned, it's definitely an add-on. When you see a founder who comes to you. So basically, what we look at is it's pretty much in alignment with what you mentioned. But one is we want to see how confident and positive is the founder in their vision, right? I mean, if they're confident in the vision, that means for us it's easier to understand that they believe in their vision, right? That's step one. After that, what we want to see is the execution capabilities. Now, it could be a single founder company. That's again not a criteria for us, but we would want to understand how the founder plans to execute his vision, whether he intends to have a team or a co-founder or key management professional persons coming in at a later stage. What is the plan like? So that is another thing that we look at. Having said that, it could be a slightly long-term plan, it could be a short-term plan, that's open to discussion. What we also see is some of the softer aspects in the founders, in the sense, not just if they come, of course the professional background does play a role, as you rightly mentioned, because if a person is venturing into a space, I'd want to understand that has he worked in that space before, just to kind of gauge the understanding the person brings, the kind of weightage the person brings, not just from the work experience, but probably from the network that the person built as well. So these are some of the criterias when it comes to like something which is on paper. In terms of softer aspects, what we look at is a smart founder, not just from a not just from an on paper business perspective, but also otherwise. Like capability of handling money smartly is one thing that we would want to see as well. The kind of responsiveness the founder has when they're interacting with a VC. Because we are a founder first VC, we would definitely want to see that as well. These are a few softer aspects that we look at when we meet up with the founders. But having said that, there is no specific weightage applied to their education. Yeah, it's an add-on. Plus, if they've been serial entrepreneurs, it's again something which just adds a layer to what they are doing currently.
Yeah, I think Gaurav, I would say, what Urvi said, it triggered two thoughts in my mind. One is I agree with the execution that she mentioned. Gaurav and I met
Right.
through a video series that I run on LinkedIn. It's called Let's Talk Business. I think it was
Right.
episode 3 or 4, one of the most, I would say, liked or commented one. It is called
Yes.
Innovation. Yeah, right. Innovation. I think 3 or 4. I don't remember now.
Yeah, so
Innovation is overrated.
innovation is overrated. Then there was this on the startup job roles, functions of the team. So how do the
Yeah. Designation means responsibility.
yeah.
Right.
That was another one. Yeah. So in innovation is overrated. I talked about the same thing, that a lot of founders think that their idea is will change the world. Yeah. This idea is never thought before. Once in a century idea. Yes, maybe everything of that is true. But of course, do you know how many e-commerce platforms came and failed before and after Amazon? There is something in the founder. How many social network came and failed before and
Yeah.
after Facebook. So LinkedIn. So there are so many examples that execution is actually everything. Innovation, you can copy, you can get inspiration from somebody else and get the idea. So that's not all. So I agree with you, Urvi, on this.
Right.
Definitely. Secondly, what you mentioned is also right, that if he or she is a serial entrepreneur. Adding to that, I would say that it is definitely a big add-on if the founder has developed a startup and has, I would say, sold off his or her stake to a VC and exited. So I want to see a founder, which is a big add-on. Not that it is a must, but who has gone through the entire journey of creating a startup, getting angel investors or seed investors on board, going through the second round, pitching to investors, developing business, executing it, going to a level where he is bought out by another technology or whoever in the industry, a giant, and now starting second one, because this whole journey has taught him so much or her so much.
Yeah.
That's a huge add-on for me as well. But again, it's not a must. It's not a must.
Absolutely. It's not like you would not look at a first time founder, of course,
Yeah.
but it's just that the whole experience of it, and I kind of also feel that they have a problem solving capability that gets added on through their entire experience that they've had.
Yes, true.
Yeah.
Cool. So before opening it to the participants, so I have another question regarding the team and founders. So basically, when it comes to looking at the founders, their traits, or how they have been their private experience and everything. So basically, before going or investing in that particular startup, the trust has to be there. So, and that is due to the credibility, how they have performed during the previous bosses, during their previous colleagues and everything. So basically, how do you check or do the credibility, check of these founders? So I would like to know on that as well, so that if anyone is raising funds, so planning to start startups, they should be having good terms with their, ex bosses or the colleagues. Like they should be having good image before leaving their job. So yeah, your view on that.
Gaurav, to me, yes and no, because then I have to examine the capabilities of the boss as well.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So
So,
basically, Phoebe, what is your how do you identify the right, like you are investing in the right founder? Like, is it the good one or not?
see, what happens is, for me, it is subjective. There is no set rules
Yeah.
again, or procedure how I check the background or his credibility or her credibility. It's very simple. When a founder puts a pitch deck or he or she pitches to me, on a session like this or in the meeting, of course, a few names or numbers, are thrown in the presentation. Okay. Names of institutions, companies, names of people, or even numbers. For example, the market research data. For me, this is the first check that I do after the pitch. That I verify every number in the market size or industry sector or whatever he or she is doing. I verify every number. If I find that even those numbers are exaggerated, okay, even by 0.01%, and in the second round or whatever, the founder cannot convince me that his or her numbers are correct and mine are wrong. It's a no, because this itself will crack the trust. So it doesn't matter whether he exaggerated by 10 times or he exaggerated by 1%. It is breach of trust for me immediately. This is one. Secondly, now I've been investing for now how many, 5 years, close to 5 years. I've invested in 17 startups, exited from 6. I'm mentor on a few, VCs, accelerator VCs, as well as incubation centers. So through which I have created my own, I would say, network in the startup ecosystem, or network with the founders as well. And for me now, it is not very difficult to check credibility from my own sources, which the founder doesn't know whom I'm going to talk to. and I'm sure Windrose Capital or anybody have these capabilities. So founders, guys, if you are trying to do anything which is offbeat, okay, you will be caught. This is for sure. Either from an angel investor like me, if you go to Windrose Capital or any organized fund, definitely. So we have our own ways of doing background check. It will not be your boss or your ex-boss, for sure.
Absolutely. So even for us, the transparency level and the kind of honesty a founder brings into not just the numbers on the presentation, but also when we interact with them is something which kind of gives us a slightly higher confidence in the founders. I mean, we don't expect the founder to be perfect, right? I mean, today all of us, especially from where they're coming from, even if especially if they're first time founders, right? So we kind of understand if there is some knowledge gap per se, if you can call it that, but we appreciate honesty and transparency. That's one thing. Coming back to your question, Gaurav, how do we assess the founders, just the founder, the softer aspects of the founder? As Mandar rightly mentioned, there are ways in which, the network that has been created already enables us to, get like a background check of the founder, just to understand the founder beyond the meeting that we've had. Apart from that, as a procedure that we follow, we end up scheduling a meeting with the founder and co-founders. So meeting them upfront also helps us understand how the co-founder dynamics are. Whether they are able to explain their roles and responsibilities just beyond the title, right? I mean, I could have a title of a CEO, but having said that, if I don't have a CTO, I should be able to kind of understand the tech aspects that are needed in the business. I can't just be sitting and saying that, oh, I'm a CEO, so I'm not going to look at other things. We want to see how rounded a founder is. As I mentioned earlier, because the stage at which they're at, they may not have a full-fledged team, but to understand whether they are aware of the team that they have and the kind of scope that they need to cover with the current team is what we want to see. So again, meeting up with them clearly helps us get a lot of answers that otherwise would have not been easy, right? Over a call, it's never easy to judge how the two co-founders are. So that's just pretty much in a crux how we go about it.
Gaurav, one of the things.
Sorry.
Please.
As our process, since Mandar mentioned earlier that we are a lot more process oriented, being a venture capital fund. So we also have a due diligence process. Having said that, we don't specifically cover founder background checks in it, but somehow or the other you get, when the whole legal DD is done, when the whole financial due diligence is done. So it kind of helps us get a lot of answers even at a later stage.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Adding to this, one of the things I now, maybe I mentioned now, Gaurav, is for example, if I'm investing in the second round, there is a seed round, which is a smaller round before me. One of the things that I always ask is, whether the investor in your seed round is topping up, or he is going to do another round. Maybe his budget constraints, he wants other co-investors. This is very important question, because I want to see, of course, that this reveals the answer reveals a lot of things for me. If he's not interested, or even worse, that he wants to exit. So I'm facilitating his exit by entering at that level, at early stage. I'm talking about it's a red signal for me that why he or she wants to exit. I would like to find out. I would like to have direct conversation with the earlier investors and also co-investors, because a lot of deals come to me when they already have co-investors ready and short of the last leg, which I want to contribute as well. Okay, so of course a direct conversation with the co-investors also is mutually beneficial. And it is beneficial, by the way, for the startup founder also, that all his co-investors as well as early and late investors are in conversation with each other, so that it becomes a team. As an angel investor or as Windrose Capital as well, our job is not to provide fund and just see how the game goes. Our job is also to help you, of course, passively. You are in the front end, but passively or at the back end to help you sustain your startup, grow your startup. So it is very important for the startup founder as well as us that we work as a team, with a unified goal in mind. So yeah, these are again some of the background checks that we all carry out.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's something that even we at Windrose Capital do, and actively ask as well, considering if the startup has raised funds in the past. We would also want to know if the existing investors are looking to invest in the current round, to what extent. Apart from that, we also then want to understand what were the milestones that were achieved by the founders through the previous fundraise. Kind of just helps us give the clarity in terms of what they had envisioned to achieve versus what they actually achieved. It's always a great way to assess the team, assess the idea, kind of get a validation beyond what the market is seeing.
Another point just now coming to my mind is because of this COVID situation today, it's specific to this crisis situation that we all are in. A lot of founders now coming to me to finance the bridge round. Fortunately, very few with whom I have already invested. Hardly one has approached like very directly. But there are others, who are investing in bridge round, which is at the same level where the earlier round happened 6 months back or a year back at the same valuation. Here again, Gaurav, it becomes very critical for me that why this bridge round is happening. Is it really happening because of the crisis, or crisis is just an excuse, and anyways the startup was not getting anywhere, and now it is an excuse. So this becomes even more critical for an investor like me, whether to put in a bridge round or not. And this is why I mentioned this, because a lot of proposals like this have been coming last 2 months. It's been because of the situation. I mean, I sympathize with the founders. Crisis situation, but at the same time, as an investor, it becomes a really cautious decision that I'm putting good money after bad, or is it a good investment? I'm not sure. So yeah, this is related to specific situation this month, and I would say last month.
Right. Yeah.
Perfect. So basically, how I have heard from one of our investors in the network. So how they do these credibility check is they find some person, a random person from their batchmate or someone who has been their friend groups or their previous boss colleagues. They used to do the check based on how their conduct has been, or what is the behavior, or these personal traits, like if he just like the milestone thing. So if they are able to achieve those milestones, so if that person or that particular founder has been able to focus more, or has been their previous performances have been, I mean, during the academics or during the professional life. So all those things I've seen, like they do that kind of check on the founders before investing, because this has been the, I think, team or the founder has been the thing which has been most important right now for the investors to look in investing, during this time itself. I mean, execution means everything, for right now. So basically, I'll tell from the investor perspective as well. So basically, we invest and also bet from the very early stages, so that they come with us with the idea. So we also focus more on the founding team, who their mentors are or who have guided them till now, and what is their vision to develop their product. Will they be able to commercialize it, or is it just a research project? They'll just develop build something out of produce an IP, or they just try to sell it. Also, how their vision or plan to build a business around that. So we also look, I think that's the most important part. Other than the market size, business model, innovation. Innovation works only when the team can execute those things properly. So great. I think we have nice points, nice thoughts we have exchanged during the this discussion. So let's take the question from the participants. So
Okay.
I think we have a question from Mr. Paul. Okay, so he's asking when an angel investor is interested in investing USD 50K as pre-seed round, and if they are from Korea and Japan, it is not possible to research them on LinkedIn or social network sites. In this case, is it mandatory to do detailed review of the investor before accepting the funds? Okay, I mean, I think it's from the starter's point of view, so we may go off track from our topic. So what do you suggest if a startup should receive the funds from foreign investors which they cannot do the research on? So if you'd like to take this question, otherwise we can skip it.
No, what's the question? That he has some investors interested from another country,
Yeah.
and how to do background check on them.
Yes.
The question.
Yeah, because
and these are individual investors.
Yeah, right. Angel investor.
See, the limited capabilities that you have with foreign investors is go through their LinkedIn profile and verify the whatever they are mentioning in the LinkedIn profile or other social media channels. This is one. If you have some kind of budget, there are lawyer firms who take a mandate and also check on these investors. So these are the two ways, depending on again your budget. Because for an early stage startup founder, maybe hiring a lawyer is not possible. Yeah, I mean, apart from that, I don't think, because I'm based in Dubai, I've been investing in India, but it's very easy for them to check with me and vice versa, because originally I'm an Indian, so I have my network here. But now, in this particular case, I think these are the things that you can have. Anything else, Urvi?
No, I think I agree with you. It kind of becomes the scope itself becomes limited, especially because they're based outside of India. Social networking sites, LinkedIn especially, probably mutual connects is something that could help you out. But I don't think there's any scope beyond that, unless, of course, you can get legal assistance on the same.
One more thing, Gaurav, because he mentioned South Korea and because I dealt with one of these cases, my advice would be to not for to answer only this question, but generally to all the startup founders that please do all your transactions through normal banking channels, legal banking channels.
Yeah.
Because he mentioned South Korea and some Asian countries, there are waves of investing through bitcoins or other cryptocurrencies, and there are exchanges in foreign countries, legal exchanges. I'm talking about the situation because your startup is in India. The situation in India, I'm observing because I have one investment which is blockchain based, but not so much. It's not a big amount that is there. But in India, the situation is still gray area. So there is a possibility that the startup founder gets this offer that we will invest through a cryptocurrency. I would say don't accept this because Indian laws are still not clear. And at the beginning, initial years of your startup, you don't want to invite unintended trouble for you. So this is one aspect immediately came to my mind because of the names of countries that you took.
Yeah.
So basically, Mr. Paul also mentioned because it is not possible to research them on LinkedIn or social network sites. So in that case, the source they have.
I would say to be very cautious.
Yeah.
Or another thing that they can do is ask the investor that we want to check, do a background check, and please provide us something that is verifiable, that we can cross-verify, that we can cross-check at the background.
Right. Otherwise, we can also
ask this direct question to the investor. There is no harm, and there is nothing to hide here because it's a business deal. It's somebody is putting money into somebody else's venture, so both the parties have equal right to do background check.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I think we can also ask, given if they have the existing portfolio, so we can also ask, if they can share the details of their portfolio companies and take this.
Yes.
Right.
In today's world of digital world or social media world, it is impossible that there is nothing verifiable for an investor or a startup founder. It is almost impossible. So yeah, there are ways, and the investor is honest. He will provide all the details for cross verification. Why not?
Yeah.
Great. So I think that answers your question, Mr. Paul. Next question, we'll take it from I don't know, the device name is coming up. How much ROI on an average investor looking for 3 to 5 years? So
there is no answer to this.
There's no. I think the best answer would be infinity. Like we want
Yes.
the huge ROI. I mean,
Whatever.
as there's no limit that you set on that.
But
I
there
would
should be
say,
some
Gaurav,
minimum.
To answer your question in a slightly different way, I would say the ROI should beat the industry average ROI. That is minimum.
Right. Yeah. That's the
Right?
minimum.
Because
There
you are
should be some
creating a
minimum.
startup which is going to basically pivot the things, or which is going to transform the things that are already happening in the old school environment in your industry, whichever industry or whichever sector you are. So obviously it should beat the industry average or sector average by large, by far, not slight, by far. So it depends on your ROI. ROI, it also depends on the situation, because now the digital entertainment or digital education sector, or what I can say, e-gaming or e-sports sector, fintech. These are the sectors which are experiencing a huge growth in last 2-3 months. Everybody knows.
Yeah.
So how do you determine an ROI over 3 years when the situations are changing? There is no right or wrong or correct or wrong answer to this. But yeah, it should by far beat the industry average. This is what I would say.
Absolutely.
Okay, sure. So I think I'll go for the next questions before moving on and taking the participants' question. So I have a few questions. So basically, before investing, so in case like obviously you prefer for the ones who are in the operational stage or who have some revenues. So basically, which are the metrics which you look for before investing? Or I know these metrics could be industry, vary from a particular industry to different areas. So how would you? I mean, which are the most important ones? The metrics you look for.
At what stage? Sorry.
So if any startup which is coming at the revenue stage or the early revenue stage, so I think that's how where the metrics will matter.
Purvi, you want to go first?
Right. Yeah, I'll just take a dig at it. So metrics, considering the startup has, so one is we want to see who are the clients, who are the paying clients, essentially, right? I mean, a startup can have 30 customers, but they are probably giving the product out for free, and it's like a beta test trial run. That doesn't add on to it. But what we want to see is that what is the conversion that they've done from the beta to the paying client stage. That's one thing. We want to understand what their run rate is. It could be their monthly run rate, it could be their forecasted annual run rate given the time period that they've been operational in. Another thing is, what we want to see is what is their customer acquisition cost. Again, we're not going to judge the startup on the customer acquisition cost number, but we want to see what is the current customer acquisition cost, if there's been a trend in the customer acquisition cost. Again, it's conditional to the time period the startup has been operational for. And another thing that we also look at in terms of numeric metric, if you can call it that, it's the burn rate. So it could be your gross or net burn, whatever. It's something that we would want to understand, whether you are aware of the monthly expenses that you all are incurring, if there's a clear, breakup of how those expenses are being incurred. So these are some of the few metrics we look at. If it's at a pre-revenue stage, we want to then understand what is their monetization plan, right? What is it in terms of pricing that they're looking at, and how do they intend to then go about it and have paying clients on board. So those, of course, they're not numeric metrics per se, but these are some things that we would want to look at and assess the company at as well.
Right.
I have actually Purvi covered everything. Yeah, so Urvi, sorry. So I have nothing more to add. What I would add here is one thing that she mentioned, which to me is very important. When you say MRR, ARR, burning rate, or customer acquisition cost, CAC, whatever metrics you are mentioning, I would say whether my focus will be, of course, on the metrics, and equally importantly, whether the founder or the founding team themselves understand these metrics. Are they overconfident in projecting? Are they underconfident in projecting? I'll give you a case. Do we have 2 minutes? How we are running out of time? I'll give you.
Yeah, sure. We can take that. Yeah.
I'll give you a case, which happened exactly with me last month and this month. Okay, now a founding team came to me without naming the industry, without naming anything, say X venture, and this X venture, they last month, which is beginning of May actually, they submitted a pitch deck to me. Okay, and there they mentioned that their MRR is say X. Okay, and they calculated their ARR as X into 12 or whatever.
Yeah.
Now. I responded to them, okay, let me have a look. I was not very impressed, honestly. End of May or beginning of June, they on LinkedIn messages, one of the founder, she came to me and she said that, I think to attract me, and saying that, we have massive developments, we have excellent news to share with you, blah, blah, blah. And they are into digital entertainment industry. I have to mention the industry, I'm sorry. Because it is important, and then she said that can I share with you revised pitch deck? I said, yeah, fine, share. Now when I see revised pitch deck, what happens is they grew their May revenue, okay, and May top line or revenue, whatever you call it, and June, okay, the June revenue is 3 times, of course, because they are into digital entertainment. Between May and June they grew 3 times. What she did is her ARR went also 3 times, which means she is saying that my June multiplied by 12. So this kind of metrics. So why I mentioned to the founders, because sometimes it happens innocently or sometimes it happens intentionally, but don't do all this gimmicks.
Yeah.
It doesn't work. Neither with Windrose Capital, nor with any VC, nor with angel investors like me, at least the experienced angel investors. Okay,
yeah,
it won't work. It is an average, so you cannot make your ARR 3 times just because in 1 month you got this COVID wave, and you are riding on that wave and your ARR becomes 3 times. So this is just one example I shared because it just came to my mind. This is very important that the founding team understands the metrics rather than what are the metrics.
Right, absolutely. So understanding that the trend may not continue is always critical. Another thing that we come across a lot of times is that a business would be such where they have a gross margin, they have a GMV, right, versus what their actual revenues are. So a lot of times we have numbers which are GMV numbers, and at our end, of course, because we have quite an extensive process, it kind of gets uncovered at a later stage. But one thing that we would honestly want any founder to do is that if we are asking for the revenue, please give us the actual revenue that you earn, because that just gives us a clearer picture about the company. So going about the whole, you can give us the GMV and what the revenue is, which is fine by us, but it just kind of becomes at the back of our head, we're like, okay, but we asked for the revenue number, so why is it that a GMV number has been provided? But that, I think that also kind of gives you clarity on, the understanding that the founder needs to bring when they come and speak to an investor.
Yeah, true.
Right. Perfect. So I'll have another question, which we, one of the points which we briefly touched upon. So as you said, the existence of, other investors on the cap table, and if they're investing in the next round. So is there any, case or, example which you have come through, like which you are not investing or which gives you strength in investing, So how important is it to have a good co-investors already being on the cap table itself? I mean,
Uh,
give weightage to them. So that's my question.
See, I'll tell you very honestly, Gaurav, as I mentioned at the beginning of this session, that I'm an individual investor, okay, which is a clear differentiator between me and Windrose Capital. My personal investment budget, I would say, not the budget as such, but budget per startup. I would say that the risk that I can take within one
Understand.
startup is, of course, limited. Okay, whatever be it, X amount,
Yeah.
but that is limited, right? So if the idea is fantastic, if the founder is fantastic, I want to jump into it. It's a huge scope. Okay, because of my budget constraints, of course, I look for co-investors. I have my own community. I have my own associate investors. We are so comfortable with each other that we exchange notes, we throw ideas. We exchange what you can say pitch decks, and there are a couple of deals where we invested together. So we are very comfortable. So one value that I can bring is, okay, I'm investing say 10% of the amount, and I have other 5 people in my community who are investing 10%. So that's how 60% and 40%, please look around for others, and we will invest as in the whole if the budget is or the investment size is very big. So this is one thing that is important for me, that there should be co-investor. I cannot take the whole risk. Sometimes,
Mm.
sometimes the startup investment is small and I'm alone. I'm okay, and I'm so comfortable and confident about the founder that I want to jump in. So it's case by case basis to me. This is one. Secondly, if there are co-investors coming from the founder side, as I said in one of these questions, that I do a background check on these co-investors. Because I don't want glitches, or I don't want to regret that I invested along with these investors. Apart from money, whether I make 10x in 2 years that or 1 year, that doesn't matter to me if it's a pain to be in there with that group. So it is also important for me. But yeah, co-investors to me are important from that perspective. But Urvi?
Yeah, I believe it's what you said is absolutely correct, because it's a long-term relationship, right? Uh, it goes beyond just the money that has been invested in the company. So having again, so I'll just backtrack a bit. So one is I agree with Mandar that even the stage at which we would likely want to enter, if a company is raising a much larger round, and we want to probably not invest a much larger check in that company. Co-investors are something that even we have through our own network. If a company has their own network and is already speaking to co-investors, and they've advanced in their conversations with the co-investors, there are times that they have investors on board, but the investors are looking for a lead. So that kind of it is a conversation to conversation basis, but we do want to understand who our co-investors are. We do want to be on the same page as the co-investors, because like Mandar mentioned, it's a long-term relationship. We are there through a substantial time period of the startup's journey. Although for us it kind of becomes a limited time period because it's a fund per se, but yeah, it's not like a 6-month relationship, right? I mean, it's not like we're investing and exiting in 6 months. So a good co-investor relationship is important to us. We are happy to help the startup with looking for co-investors as well through our own network. We are happy to enter a round as like the closing check or the last check that the just to fill up the round that the founder is looking to raise. We're happy to be a lead investor as well, and for us, lead is not necessarily determined by the check size. It's also determined by the role that an investor is going to play. So Windrose Capital is more than happy to take a back seat, even if I'm writing a much larger check, if there's somebody who is a co-investor who has substantial experience in the space, in the sector the company is operational in. So of course, all these things are conditional to conversations, discussions, probably negotiations. So that's what our take is when it comes to co-investments, and even going forward, finding co-investors for the larger round.
Right. And why I ask this question is because we have seen, startups raising funds, from some investors, and, while raising the follow-on round, so they feel or face the difficulty in converting them based on why you have invested or, raised funds from a particular investor, or you have given this much equity, they should not justify that. So that's the sort of, how you work with that particular investor who will invest in the long term, or won't take the advantage of your desperation and all. So
Yeah.
great.
Absolutely, because that's another thing that kind of becomes a red flag when you see on the cap table that a previous investor is holding a substantial share, but probably the value add is not equivalent to the share that has been given to the investor. So that itself is extremely crucial as well.
Right. So existing of a good investor or a good and a good value adding investor who is getting the equity contribution based on their the value they are creating to the whole startup.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Great. So I'll just ask my last question before opening it to, because we are already near the our scheduled time. So I'll just ask the last question. So important it is.
By the way, Gaurav, if
Yeah.
Urvi is okay with this, I'm not sure. We can extend by 10 minutes because
Yeah,
uh,
that's fine.
because after the first webinar, the last one, what happened is a few questions were unanswered, and
Yes.
I received personal messages, private message in LinkedIn
Right.
saying
Right.
that we asked this question and so on,
Mhm.
and I will take this opportunity to also mention to the people who are listening that for the third session, which is the last session in the series, in the registration form itself, if you can ask your questions proactively, you can type it in the window there. It will be good for us to prioritize your question, so it doesn't remain on the last page. Yeah, Gaurav, please continue.
Yeah. So when it comes to investing in a startup, how important or how do you see the the exit strategy? How long you want to be invested, or how do you see this market is interesting, this industry is hot. So how do you see the exit strategy for that particular startup? How important is it?
How important is the exit strategy, you mean?
Yes.
For me, extremely important
Mm-hmm.
because I'm investing to exit.
Right.
The psychology of an individual angel investor to an early stage VC like Windrose Capital to a long term VC, which is come at series A, B, C, whatever, is completely different. And these startup founders have to understand, and a lot of startup founders make mistake here. An angel investor like me, I'm not a hyper long term investor in you, even if I like your startup, because I know there will be a stage where your value grows so much that either you will be acquired by another giant in your sector, and I have to exit. Okay, I'm very happy to exit, or you are funded by a VC at such a high valuation that it is enough of attraction for me, to get that capital gain and invest in other startups which are early stage and low valuation, right? So for me, exit strategy is extremely important. I'm always looking for how do I exit. In fact, I always look for when I'm investing. One question that I ask to myself and I don't ask to founders is, this is a good opportunity for them to understand my mindset behind it. That how will I exit? Or I would ask myself why a VC at Series A will invest in this startup. Why? So I need a justification for this. If there is a justification with whatever knowledge and experience I have with startup growth, it's a good thing for me. So it is very important. Urvi?
Right. It's extremely critical even for us to have an answer to that question, right? Because right, as you rightly mentioned, the success of an investment is not when you put in the capital, right? The success of an investment is only when the investor gets the exit that they desire. So that's again something that we want clarity on from the founder themselves. The approach is slightly different though. But the questions that we would want answers to is what is it and how do the founders envision the exit, right? So typically we do want to understand, as Mandar mentioned, why would a larger fund invest in you? Why? What is it that is there that you have built or you have managed to do and capture the market? A lot of other aspects, right? What is it that you've done that has created value for the business and hence is now either going to get acquired or going to raise a subsequent round or is going to drive your value or eventually an IPO as well. So there are these key aspects that we do want to understand from the founder, and it's always good to have the clarity from the founder because it kind of helps us understand that they do understand the trajectory that the company is going to take. So it's always good to hear from a founder that, oh, I never want to exit this company, but it's better to hear from the founder that, oh, I had an exit opportunity at an XYZ valuation, but I feel like my company can grow a lot more and I can demand a much higher valuation. It just brings a very different confidence level across to the investor. So yeah, that is an understanding that we want clarity on.
Great. So basically, founders should be ready to provide the exit scenario to the investors as well.
That's just a very basic requirement, right? I mean, you could list down 4 or 5 possible exit scenarios that you feel are, the best scenarios for you as a founder. It may not be the same for an investor, but that's something that can be discussed.
Okay, great. So I think next we'll go for the questions from the participants. So there's one question I'm seeing from Mr. Akhilesh Babu. So the question is, if a founder is good in his vision and business model, but he has some problem with English speaking, so when it comes to his regional language, he's good. Does English matter or not in raising funds? I mean, how do you see if a particular founder cannot speak English, you will not be funding them?
Okay. It all depends on the industry sector that you are in. There are a few industry sectors which are you are going to serve because now you are Indian incubation, right? And Windrose Capital is in India. So let me tell you that if your startup is in a very high tech field and which is going to thrive on tier A city population, so your customer base, your supplier base, and your associates are going to be tier 1 city, or your customers and associates are going to be in a foreign country, say Europe, Western countries, basically Europe or US. To me, it is extremely important that your communication skills as a founder have to be good because they help you in getting your market share. They help you also to give me an exit by convincing the venture capital or pitching to the next round for funding and so on. Having said this, if your startup is going to serve in tier 2, tier 3 city, it is not important at all. It is not important at all. It depends. To me, it is not a requirement, but some industry sectors or some customer segments require that you need to have extremely good, much better than me, English speaking capabilities. It is just critical,
Right. I agree with you, Mandar, on that. The space that you're operating in is going to play a very important role in your communication skills. If you as a founder are not up to date with your communication, we would also then want to see if there's somebody else who is taking care of that aspect. So it may not be necessary that founder A has to be, all the founders have to be like at proficiency level of English speaking or communication. But if there's somebody who's filling that gap for you, it's something that we're willing to look at. So again, space, the kind of your target market is going to play an important role. Having said that, if you're capable enough or if you have a co-founder who is, primarily handling that aspect of your business in terms of business development, communication, sales, and external engagements, then of course it's going to be a different conversation altogether.
Right, perfect. So next, the question we'll take is on the startup valuation. So basically, we have the next webinar coming up on 18th of June. So we are doing it on equity valuation and negotiation. So I think I'll just request Mr. Kumar and Mr. Manish to attend the next session. You can join the webinar using the same login meeting details, so that you get your questions answered during the relevant webinar. So that's why I would like to say that. And
And
next.
to add again, now that you are ready with the question, we
Yeah.
would prefer that you ask this question in the registration form itself. So
Okay.
it will not be answered at 6 p.m. It will be answered at 5 p.m.
Right.
Right.
Okay, so I think this is the next question we'll take from Dr. Meg. So he's asking, most incubators usually hold the IP rights of the startup. So does that majorly affect the investor decision or the investment generated by the startup? In case yes, how to deal with it? So I'll just answer the first
Yeah,
part of the
this question
question.
is for you, I think. Gaurav.
Yeah, yeah. So then you can take on the investment part. So basically, Dr. Make, what I can ask for our incubator and the incubators we know. Usually, we never charge, or we never want to take your IP. In fact, we help you to file for the IPs always. So in KIT TBI itself. So we have the partner entities such as NRDC, National Research and Development Corporation. So it is supported by DSIR. So they ask us, and we have the mandate to provide the IPs to these organizations. So we file the IPs for you for free. So if your IP claim has a merit, so you can get it done at free of cost. And the startups we have supported, so they have filed 7 to 8, 9 IPs till the time they have come up to us. So that's how we also identify the startups. We get it run through the our IP experts. Like if you see any good IP in them, or protectable or defensible IP they are building, or innovation they are doing. So, but for other startups, I know there are some incubators who are charging the equity. I just suggest, if you are building something good, so don't give anyone a part in that, because that's how you are holding the key to the lock, which will be saving you or earning you future bucks or market share in your industry, because that is your defense. So don't give it and anyone your IP rights until unless there is a huge contribution in the IP development. So don't go for it. And similarly, on the investment side, how investors look at the any startup giving equity or IP rights or IP share to someone, I'll go for you, Sarmandas.
Yeah, as you rightly mentioned, if there is real value add against which the equity is going, so it is basically a contribution in kind and a real contribution, high value contribution. Yes, the incubation has a right, but I know, as you said, that there are some incubators who are charging for IP, and basically it becomes an issue in the growth stage for a startup. For me, and this also relates to the background check question that you asked. One of the things that I have in my mind is like earlier investors, as well as the incubation or acceleration through which the startup has come from. If the startup has come from earlier in its life through an incubation or acceleration. So I talk to the incubation acceleration. I understand their deal, the incubation deal with the startup at an early stage. And of course, I have my own lawyer. He checks, that it is not basically bad for me as an investor at a later stage as well, right? So this is one. Secondly, Gaurav, if you remember, and some of the participants who also joined the first session, I mentioned that guys find a very good lawyer, okay, even from earlier stage. I'm not saying you give in every MOU and every document for him to draft and review, but find a good lawyer who is expert in startups, okay, who can work for you and assign a budget, however small it is, for the legal fees from your start, even if you are bootstrapping. This is extremely important. Again, this was covered, I don't know, episode 8 or 9. Accountant and lawyer, these two things are extremely important if the startup founder is not from the financial or legal background, okay. Because you don't want, again, a small mistake in the earlier stage to become a big problem for you when you start growing. So yeah, that's it. Urvi?
Right. No, I absolutely agree with you on that. IPs are something even we look at, and we would ideally want it in the company's name, right? If that is not the case, then we would want the startup to kind of just undertake the legal procedure that they need to follow to then probably have the IP on the company's name. We've had cases in the past where the IP is in the founder's name, but then what if the founder leaves? What if there is a possibility of the founder leaving and starting a competitive business? I mean, the entire point of investing in a startup is then taken away. So it is something that even we want to kind of vet when whilst we're considering investing in a company. Of course, for us, a lot of these pieces also get covered at the due diligence stage that we follow. Like, it's a thorough due diligence that we follow. But yeah, these are critical pieces that are important for the startup from the perspective of the revenue generation, future value generation, creation, and all of that.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so basically, I'll also tell you one thing. So I know there are some, consultants or third-party vendors who ask for, IP rights, and they also charge you money. So they are like two things. So if you're go for the, only, one thing, don't just give money as well as give the rights to that particular,
Yeah.
person. And because he'll be having, either you have to buy the rights later on when you are, generating profits or raising funds, and that may not give you the right valuation as well.
Yes.
So either go for the IP rights, don't give anything to them, or just ask for how much they will charge for the IP development. They won't be having any contribution or rights on that. So
Right.
yeah, and on that part, I think at incubator itself, we also advise. So just like you asked how to deal with it, so you can ask them, you go for the either the the IP rights, or just the how much you want to charge. So you can reach out to multiple just like our incubator as well. So we have the private consultants to government agencies to the subsidized IP filing fee from the government. So yeah, that's how I think you can get the help of incubators in that case, and that's how you'll help or guidance more on.
Yeah.
So next we'll move on to the question. Yeah, so Mr. Somnath is asking how effective are the research grants for early stage startups. So basically, I'll say if this the early stage startup, so it's good to have a grant if you're generating any IP, so that you can work on your IP, or get to the MVP, or at least something you can show to the investor before a POC you can show to the investor. Otherwise, it will be very difficult to raise funds based on idea, which doesn't have any proof of working or proof of concept. Right. So yeah. Anyways, like Mr. Kumar will be taking the valuation question in the next round. So I'll just suggest put the question in the registration form, and we'll take that in the start of the session. Okay, so Somnath, I think this is the question from the last webinar. What is the right time to approach VC? So I think we should take that. I think Somnath must haven't attended the last webinar. So, sir, if you'd like to share something on that.
I would say we covered this. Me and Vinit covered this question,
Yeah,
the same
that's
question.
why. Right.
So I think I would suggest Urvi, if you can give your views.
Yeah. Great. So the right time to approach an early stage VC would ideally be when you have at least created an MVP. You've received market validation. You may be at an early stage revenue generation, phase, or you could have, you have a clear idea and visibility as to when you would start monetizing. Now, again, it depends on a lot of factors. It's not looked at in isolation. As a VC, we're not going to look at a company and say, "Oh, you've been operational since 6 months, but you're not generating revenue." Of course, that's not an argument at all, right? But having said that, even if you don't have early revenues, or you have not started, or you feel like you're going to take at least another 3-4 months to generate revenues, what then we want to understand is that how long have you been operational, right? Because those pieces of information are going to be important for us to understand the time period you took from the time you started the company versus when you decided to monetize. Of course, multiple factors will come into the picture even during that time period, but that's something that can be taken up for discussion. So market validation, early revenues, if you have been able to generate, that's great. If not, clear visibility on what your monetization plan is and how do you intend to implement it. Clarity, if you've done a beta stage, or if you have paying pilots, that's also a good thing, good sign for us as early stage investors. But if none of this is there, we would want to understand how you intend to then monetize. So I hope that answers your question. These are just very basic things that we look at over and above the operational time the company has been, incorporated and started off business.
Right. Perfect. So we have many other questions as well in the chat box, but I think it's time for us to close the webinar today as well, because I see a lot of questions, but these are like somewhere or other, not relevant to today's webinar. For any guidance or any view on from us, you can just write to me. I'm just sharing my email in the chat box in case you need any help or want to connect with Mandar sir or Urvi from Windows for investments. So
Yes.
please, we can introduce you to that, or if you are looking for any incubation, we can also do that. So yeah, we are coming to the close to the today's webinar. Thank you so much, Mandar sir and Urvi, to attend the session. So yeah, where did Mandar sir go?
I think he
Okay.
got exited out.
Yeah. Oh, right. Can you hear me? Yeah, you're there. So I'm unmuting you.
Yes. Hi.
Yeah, perfect.
Sorry, there was some disturbance. I was thrown away by Zoom. Now I'm in again. Sorry.
Right. Yes. So similarly, we have the next webinar coming up on 18th of June, same time, on Thursday, 5 to 6 p.m. And the topic of the webinar is valuation and negotiation, equity valuation for the startups, how they can, work on the valuation side, all their queries answered during the webinar. So I'm also sharing the feedback link to this webinar. So you can share your feedback over there, and you can, if you have any suggestions regarding the format or the questions we are taking, so you can also share there. Right, and I'd like to thank everyone who have joined us, and we'll be sharing. So the emails which you have registered, we'll be sharing the list or the link to the which will be putting the recordings of these webinars, so you can go back to the videos and check how if you want to go back and refer back to the video, so you can get the help of that as well. So thank you so much everyone for attending, and it was really great having you. Thanks for your patience listening to the answers, and yeah, I'll just ask everyone to attend the next session as well. That's the last in the series, and yeah, hope to have you. Thank you so much, Urvi and Mandar sir. It's been possible due to you. So yeah, we have been able to answer the most of the questions. Yeah, we haven't covered some of them, but yeah, we can get it done. I've just asked them to, if they have any queries, to share it with me, and I can share it with you so that you can give, if you have any response on that, we can give it, share it back with them.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay,
Thanks.
perfect.
Thank
You
you,
so much. It
Gaurav,
was a
and
Thanks
nice.
a lot,
Urvi.
Gaurav. Thanks, Mandar.
Yeah.
It was great to be a part
Guys,
of it.
yeah, sure, Urvi, pleasure.
Yeah,
And
it's a
guys,
great
see you
evening time.
next week now.
Yeah, see you next week.
Yeah,
Sir.
All right.
see you.
Yeah,
Bye-bye.
bye, Urvi. Bye. Yeah.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Yeah.
Bye bye.